Well, hello everyone. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
And welcome to the Back Catalog Listening Party. My name is Mother Banjo, one of your hosts.
My name is Anthony Ihrig, the other host.
And today we have joining us all the way from Minneapolis, Dylan Hicks.
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
Well, folks are excited for this show, as are we. And we're excited it's Friday and that we get to gather together to revisit old records and chat with you. And it looks like New Jack was early to the party. We couldn't wait for the party to get started.
He was here before noon today.
I know. That's great. So, and says he loves a Twyla Tharp. That's one of the songs on the record we're going to revisit today. So we'll hopefully get to that one. Connie says hello from Richfield.
Hey, Connie.
Anne is joining us. Yes, Friday the 13th. That's right.
Yeah.
So I don't know if any of you are superstitious out there, but
Oh, I hadn't tuned into that. Yeah.
So who knows what might happen? But I can guarantee one thing will happen: good music, and I guess two things: good conversation, and three things: a beverage. So I have some wine, the finest box wine from my kitchen right now happening. And Tony, what are you enjoying on this Friday afternoon?
I'm enjoying a little Castle Danger cream ale.
Nice. So
from
one of my
here in
favorites.
Minnesota. Yeah. Cheers.
Yeah. And
I
Dylan.
I'm sober, but which is not the reason. There are other drinks, but I have water.
All
Well,
right.
water is always a good bet.
Good
I
to
will say.
hydrate.
Always good idea. And we have Joni joining us. Hello, everything. So glad to be here. And Nina, hi from downstairs.
Oh yeah.
Really local here on the
Yeah.
Back Catalog
Hyper
Listening
local.
Party. Well, again, all three of us joining you from Minneapolis today, where it is the snow and melting and refreezing continues. I have some crazy ice dams, which I want to forget about right now. So I'm going to.
Are you confronting them, Ellen? We've been kind of ignoring them.
Well, I mean, I ignored them, and that's why they're now where they are.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But they kind of grew overnight. Like I was like, oh, my everything's looking good at the house, and then like yesterday I looked out and I was like, what happened? They just kind of formed and started taking over. But again, enough about my ice dams. We're going to talk about some damn good music is what we're going to do. So
Ooh, nice. I see what you did there. Nice.
yeah, it's pretty good. Folks who live around the Twin Cities might be familiar with Dylan Hicks. He's worn a lot of hats in our local music scene as a writer, an author, and musician. And what does your hat say, Dylan? I can't see. Just
It's a very obscure
another hat.
outdoor outfitter called Patagonia.
Yes, Patagonia.
We said I wore a lot of hats. This is the one I had nearest to
This is
hand.
the one. Excellent. Well, he is demonstrating that he wears a lot of hats, and maybe for folks who are less familiar with your work, you could give a little background about where you grew up and maybe how you got into making music, in particular, what led up to this record we're going to talk to, which is a more recent album.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was born in 1970. I had a somewhat peripatetic early childhood, not because either of my parents were in the service, as it's sometimes asked, but my parents were divorced, and then my stepdad was a newspaper reporter, so we moved around a lot for job opportunities for him. So I was born in Texas. We lived in Idaho and North Dakota, a little bit in Illinois, and settled here in 1983 when I was 12. And I really lived here without any real interruption since then. I was away for a summer, but that's about it.
And,
but there was other parts of the question.
just like how you fell into making music.
Yeah, I mean, I did take a few piano lessons as a boy when we were in Idaho Falls, Idaho, which is where we lived right before Minneapolis. That was about a year and a half of lessons. I did retain some of that, some basics of learning to read music and that kind of thing. Those were interrupted because it's not a great story, but my parents rented a truck, but they decided to leave the piano behind and consign that and then pick up a new piano in Minneapolis. But the people to whom they consigned the piano, I don't know, I guess the word for it is stole. They stole the piano.
Oh no. That's awful.
I mean, it wasn't a valuable piano, but But I wasn't a very disciplined or prodigious student, so I guess I didn't cry about that a lot. And my stepdad is an amateur guitarist, a pretty good one, so there were guitars around. I learned how to play some chords on those and started writing songs on guitar, and then later returned to piano. So pretty self-taught. I didn't spend a lot of time practicing scales in my bedroom. I kind of learned enough to start writing songs, and then was playing in clubs when I was 20. I guess later in life I tried to do a little more of that technical work, but I have a lot to learn in that way.
Mm-hmm. And you've made lots of different styles of music over the years, and your recent records feel a little bit different from your earlier records. What can you tell us about this record we're going to revisit today in terms of what led up to this album?
Well, so this was actually I released I guess I've released 3 records since COVID began. The first was my collaboration with John Munson Hicks Party Supplies. That's an album where I was the songwriter and the piano player, but he was the principal singer and lead producer and bassist, and it was very much put together as a group. But and then I have a more recent record called Airport Sparrows with a group called Small Screens. We might touch on later. This was between those two, and it was I didn't perform in support of this record. It was made very quickly, so I didn't really have recording equipment at the time. I had some when I was in my 20s. I had either a 4-track cassette recorder, or eventually I had kind of a more elaborate home studio setup, but still tape-based. And I sold all that equipment, I think partly to make room for a child's bedroom and just to raise money for something else, I guess. And so my friend John Field sort of helped me think about some things I might want to pick up to put together a small home recording setup. I think it was right after the election was called in 2020 for Joe Biden. I kind of some stress relieved, and I felt I could kind of proceed. And within a week and a half or so, I was sort of making things that sounded kind of like music on that digital audio workstation. So I sent John Field something. Just would you mix this for me? I just kind of want to get a sense for what it sounds like, because I'm not really a mixer. I thought maybe in 2.5 weeks he might have something for me, but 3 hours later he sent me something back. What about this? In the end, I didn't use that tune, but it was confidence building. I didn't think the song was quite strong enough, and I played everything myself. So I thought, well, I could probably do this with better material and by reaching out to some other musicians to kind of, do some things I can't do. So that's kind of how and then I made the whole record, I'd say in a couple months, 2.5 months or so. And it was pretty, it was sort of a pretty deep period of COVID. So it wasn't a lot of other stuff going on. And so I don't know, it was kind of fun. I got a lot of stuff was, a lot of shuttling back and forth. I mean, that's not COVID style, but a lot of tracks coming to me at 1:30 a.m. and I got to hear them now. And then you're up really late, sorting them out. But everybody really doing a lot of, we'll probably get to that later, but everybody kind of going above and beyond in terms of their contributions, remote contributions. So
nice.
Wonderful. Well, let's dig into the music, because it seems like some folks have had a week. I see Anne fell on the ice and had to go to urgent care today. Yeah. Oof. So, there's a lot going on, and I think we could all use the healing power of music. So we're going to dig into this record. It's called Accidental Birds. It was released in 2021, as Dylan said, in the height of the pandemic. And the first track you picked to listen to was actually one of the ones that one of the folks tuned in requested. So this is great. Twyla Tharp. Is there anything you want to say about this song before we take a listen?
Well, I thought, I guess I would, I didn't literally think I would make a hit, because that didn't seem quite plausible, but I thought I would try to write something that was sort of patterned after how people go about making hits now. mean, not that there's a variety of ways to do that, but so I don't know. I was listening to, there were some songs I already was listening to, like Harry Styles' "Adored You" and some of the Dua Lipa songs and some earlier tunes by The Weeknd. And I just kind of maybe took 4 or 5 of them and just kind of played along with them and just kind of took some notes, nothing too studious, but they were all 4-chord loops. Not that that's the only way people operate, but in this case, I just happened to pick 4 tunes that they all had a 4-chord loop that there's no harmonic development. There's only layering and dynamic development throughout the tune. And they were all about 3 minutes and 16 seconds to 3 minutes and 21 seconds. It was a very narrow, length. So I tried to stick to that, and I did, in fact, stick to a 4-chord loop and just only varied the sections through melody or through texture and dynamics. So yeah, that was kind of something I don't usually do. I don't always necessarily write fancier tunes harmonically, but I usually do change things, but I didn't change things here.
All right, well, let's give it a listen. It's actually, I think, a great track to kick off our weekend. This is Dylan Hicks, Twyla Tharp, here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
My teeth are white. This ain't a Gap Band song, but I guess it'll do alright. Anyway, it don't matter now what the DJ spins, 'cause baby, it's you, got me shaking like gelatin. I am the strings, you are the heart. You make me dance like Twyla Tharp. And so I bounce, bounce, bounce like the you put some custom hydraulics on my Chevy Caprice. Yes, I bounce, bounce, bounce. Text the city, let's dance some more. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Kick on the 3, clap on the 4. Cut me off with that 4 for 2 melon balls. Holding up load-bearing walls. No road ties, no grabbing, no skeeves allowed. We're gonna change the world. First we gotta move the crowd. I am the strings, you are the heart. You make me dance like Twyla Tharp. And so I bounce, bounce, bounce like the SMP. You put some custom hydraulics on my Chevy Caprice. I mean, I bounce, bounce, bounce. Text the city, let's dance some more. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Kick on the 3, clap on the 4. I am the strings, you are the heart. You make me dance like Twyla Tharp.
I love that ending. That's so great. And yes, that does sound like a bona fide hit. I'd love to hear that on pop radio.
Yeah,
Man,
man.
sounds
Yeah.
great. Twyla Tharp by Dylan Hicks here on the back catalog listening party from his 2021 release, Accidental Birds, which we're revisiting today with Dylan joining us live on the show. And looks like some other folks joining the party. Megan. Megan saying hello from Richfield. Twyla Tharp is inspiring some new art today.
Nice.
And we like that. And Lynn joining the party. Hey, Lynn, you don't have to apologize for being late. We're always glad to have you. And wife is drinking Lefroy, and I'm drinking Heineken. Well, welcome to the party. Let us know where you're tuned in from if you're enjoying a beverage or a
Cheers.
snack on this Friday. And if you have any questions for Dylan about the music as we go today. And I just love that a pop song like that, which does sound like a genuine hit. So I think you did accomplish something, Dylan, even if
Agreed.
the royalty checks from Spotify aren't pouring in, in the pennies. But I do think that I don't hear. I love that the main chorus is like, "You make me want to dance like Twyla Tharp and bouncing like the SMP." I mean, these aren't lyrics that you typically hear in your like teen pop song. So I really love the way you wove that in.
Yeah, I should mention too that I didn't before that. In addition to me playing the stuff and programming the stuff, and then John Fields mixing, Adam Levy plays those layered rhythm guitars, and Michelle Kinney plays the cello. So
Oh, nice. I
there
was
are
wondering with those guitars.
traditionally
sound
played
great.
instruments as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I tried to, on a couple of tunes on this record, I tried to sort of think about, I guess, sort of dance and even some dance and sort of sex songs that whose narrators were middle aged, or if not middle aged, not terribly young. So, like in that song, which is a dance song, there's a line, "Text the sitter, let's dance some more." So you're at least at the age where you have to like text the sitter.
Yeah. Well, even the Twyla
I'm
Tharp
past that age
reference,
now.
I think
Our son is a full-grown adult, but there are a couple other tunes too where I tried to kind of think about. It's kind of hard to, just as it's sort of a challenge sometimes to write a. It's so some of those themes can be challenging if like I've been in a successful and ongoing relationship for close to 3 decades now. So certainly I've written love songs during that period, but sometimes it's hard to write the sort of some of that other romantic material when you're not young and sort of full of longing and that kind of thing. So, so it's
Well,
sort of
it is fun to hear this dance song, especially knowing that you recorded this in COVID at a time where we were all at home and kind of like yearning to be out and like dancing and being with people. It feels like all this pent up energy is in this song
yeah.
that I can really relate to because, any dance parties that were happening right here in the
Right.
house.
Right, yeah.
On Fridays.
Well,
at
it's funny
4.
because almost all this record I made on my, I do own monitors. They're reasonably professional monitors, but I didn't really use them very much. I just pretty much sat in the living room or the dining room on the dining room table and just made it on my laptop with the laptop speakers.
Well, that
It
gets
really
to a
wasn't a
question.
Discotech 5.
You didn't have the subwoofer rumbling through the house.
No, I think I just found it I think I found it calming to do that because everything felt very provisional. Like I'm just fooling around on my laptop. I'm not making a decision about, well, I think we're gonna put a side chain on this compressor here. I mean, it was just,
Playing.
yeah.
Well, that gets to a question actually I had. You mentioned you had kind of transitioned from old kind of analog recording styles on tape and things, and this digital audio workstation thing was it sounded like this was the first. Is this the first project that you did yourself like that? And if so, like how did that kind of change your process? Kind of delving in with maybe unlimited tracks and the ability to cut and paste and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, it was the first time I had made a record where I was the engineer on the sort of fundamental material. The previous records, at least at least two of them were made all digitally on Pro Tools, but I just wasn't really in charge of that aspect. And then in the 90s, often there was kind of a weird hybrid, it was, you would record to 2-inch tape, but often there would be a Pro Tools interface, so you might do some editing after the. So there was a bit more digital work done in the 90s than maybe people remember. Even if it was, an analog, you were still using the really expensive 2-inch tape. As far as process, I did have some limitations really because I had memory limitations. I didn't have enough RAM to do everything I could possibly want to do. So sometimes the track would kind of die because there was just too much happening.
Had to take off the string section or something.
Computer's like, I can't handle any more tracks. Yeah.
It really wasn't that complex, but I would just, have a laptop. It's a nice laptop, but there were just a few little plugins, which kind of simulate the sounds of old-fashioned equipment. Sometimes they would take up a lot of space, and I would have to. But most of that stuff I didn't really worry about because John Fields could do that better than I can. I'm taking my hat off now.
Anyway. For folks who don't know, John Fields is like a world-class engineer, producer, musician. Like,
yeah, right.
What a great person to set up your home studio. When you said
he didn't set it up, but he just gave me some advice. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. Gave me good recommendations on a couple of things. Yeah, and then he's really fun to work with as a mixer because he surprises you every time.
Well, if you, it looks like Wiley is joining us from Fairfax, Virginia, loving the groove on Twyla Tharp. And yeah, it was a great way to kick off the show today. But we have a lot of tracks to get to from this record. We're going to see how many we can get through on today's show because we were, this album, again, it goes into a lot of different directions. So I would love to get as many of these tracks as we can. So the next track you picked to feature today, Dylan, is Drunk from Work. Is there anything you want to say about this before we dive in?
Well, I think I'll address that after.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's give it a spin. This is Dylan Hicks, Drunk from Work, here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
dance straight each time I say I love her. But hey, that's me, and yeah, I know I'm calling. Drunk from work, I'm calling. Drunk from work, I'm calling. Drunk from work again. Calling. Drunk from work, I'm calling. Drunk from work, I'm calling. Drunk from work again. Calling. Drunk from work, I'm calling. Drunk from work, I'm calling. Drunk from work again.
All right. Dylan Hicks with Drunk from Work from his 2021 album Accidental Birds, which we are revisiting today on the back catalog listening party. And man, I love the jazz grooves on that. Tell us who's playing on that, because that sounded like a real instrument to me.
Yeah, well, JT Bates is the drummer.
Mhm.
There's also a program drum that runs throughout the tune. I just had him kind of play over it, or asked him to play over it, rather. But he does all the syncopated, really cool funk stuff. But I kind of think I like how it blends with this very sort of thin digital drum foundation too. And then Christopher Thompson, is playing the tenor sax, and he's in this group Small Screen. So pretty much everybody in that group plays on this record, but we weren't really together or barely on the same track. So, but it kind of gave rise to that group. And that was one where, for the most part, these songs, I think only, I don't know for sure, but I think only two or three of them maybe existed before this project, before I made the record kind of in a hurry. That was one of the ones that it was in a folder. I keep lots of folders of songs. Either they're just for individual albums or projects, or if I'm not the leader of the group, maybe it's somebody else's songs. But I have one that's called Abandoned Songs, or and I'm not sure if that chart had really made it into that folder, but it was one that I didn't really think I had a home for. I tried to play it. I never tried to play it with a band, but I tried to play it more conventionally, and it felt like something I had done before. I just didn't feel I wasn't really stimulated by it. But this time I sat on my love seat with my laptop on my lap, and I did have a chart, the chord chart and the lead sheet and some basic things on it. And I just started kind of programming those things in, thinking I would just kind of change. I would put acoustic instruments or hand-played instruments in later. And I don't know, just a vibe, it just seemed like it was kind of cool all of a sudden. And then I did start to add some regular instruments, and then brought in those friends. And so I don't know, it was something about that recording process kind of revived that song that had sort of lost interest for me, and then I became one of my favorites.
Mm. Yeah, and I'd be curious. It sounds like maybe each of these songs maybe had a different process, but when you were laying down these tracks, did you usually start with did you usually have a song? I know this was from a one you had from earlier, but
Yeah.
did you often start with sort of like a real instrument playing a song and then lay down things, or did it sometimes start with the beats and the grooves on your computer?
For a lot of the songs that were written during and I said we did a couple of these tunes in a conventional studio when there was we were in kind of a little bit safer space with the pandemic, but just kind of had a socially distanced session with no rehearsal. But as far as the electronically produced ones, Ellen, most of them, a few of them existed before, and I kind of tried to transform them into electronic things. But a lot of them were, as you say, just kind of drawn from some sort of groove or some sort of sound, and then I would build the song. So in a way, I suppose I was thinking of things like funk, that the funk process, as in something like James Brown, and then rock groups that took cues from that, like Talking Heads, where the song kind of formed from the groove, and you built a groove, and then you imagine what kind of song could come from that.
Mm. Yeah, really interesting. And it feels like this it's funny, so many different artists had different things that came out of this time at home for them, but it sounds like this is something that maybe was, kind of a shift for you as to how you made previous records, not just doing it at home, but maybe even the process of creating the songs, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, or at least a return. I had done some of that kind of stuff. Well, when I was really young, when I was a teenager, I was into all sorts of music, rock and jazz and R&B and then hip hop. Particularly when I was in my late teens, was a real focus for me. I never really imagined at the time how to incorporate that into my own music. At least not in a. I didn't know how to do that really in the way that someone like, like a sort of a white man, my contemporary like Beck, sort of managed to sort of think about ways to be a singer-songwriter who's also obviously taking in dialogue with hip hop. But I didn't really know how to navigate that too well. So later I worked with a fellow named Jason Heinrichs, who unfortunately died not of COVID, but during this period. And he made some records. We made some records together where he was doing both playing. He's a multi-instrumentalist and programming and sequencing. So, but I hadn't done any of that since the late 90s, really. And that was, again, more the kind of thing where I would bring in a song and he would do the electronic work.
Yeah, it sounds like. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tony.
I was just, you go ahead. I think mine might take us in a different direction.
Okay. I was just going to say, it almost sounds in a way like learning how to do the electronic parts of the production is like learning a new instrument, like learning, it's like a whole different palette to work with, than playing a guitar or piano or other instruments that you probably knew previously. But which probably is what opened up the songwriting for you. I know we've had one theme we've had from a lot of artists we've had on the show over the last couple of years that we've been doing this has been whenever people do something new on a recording, it kind of inspires a shift in new creativity, whether it's a new instrument or recording differently or anything like that. So so it's cool to hear. And it looks like Joe says, starting with a great groove and then the lyrics and focus. That's how Paul Simon describes the making of Graceland. So you're in good company with Paul Simon.
Sure, yeah. That's a great record too, yeah. Well, he became more groove oriented, in his solo career, even before that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I admire that. I always, I love his writing, but also his commitment to creating grooves is also.
Well, I was just going to ask how this kind of shift and these types of productions kind of during COVID times may have affected how you perform your music, and if these types of songs from this record get translated in a different way when you play it live, or do you try to recreate it like the album? How did that transition happen?
Yeah, it's great. Well, we didn't. I put this out. I was kind of eager to put this out pretty much right away. The time between getting the mixes back and then having the CD or the digital version out was really quite close. So I didn't book anything or try to perform. It was kind of difficult to perform. But also I think there are 12 or 13 people on this record all together. So kind of hard to decide, what's the band, So I just didn't really do that part of it. And I kind of liked that, it was sort of, really wasn't, that could be the stressful part, I really enjoy performing and it's a real thrill to play on stage, but it can be stressful to get people out and all that stuff. So I didn't worry about that with this one. So we do play maybe 2 or 3 of the songs, and we don't try to reproduce them. I just brought in the chart and gave them the recording. Again, like sometimes like they played on it in this weird remote fashion, but we just try to transform them into songs that we can play as a live group, and they get kind of and then we switch the arrangements around. So I kind of prefer to do that. I don't really like. That's been more fun to me than to try to. I don't know what I would do. I have to bring my laptop on stage or something like that.
Yeah. Well, that seems like a good time maybe to talk about a big live show you do have coming up here in the Twin Cities. It looks like you and the Small Screens, which is a lot of the people that are on this record, are going to be performing at the Dakota, one of the best listening rooms anywhere, really. But here in Minneapolis, for sure. And you're putting on a show with the Neighborhood Quartet. Can you talk a little bit about that? January 24th.
Yeah. Well, it is a cool bill with the Neighborhood Quartet, and they do a great mix of vocal and instrumental music, drawing on a lot of different styles, jazz and pop and blues, and so that seemed like a kind of a apt pairing.
And it's an all-star band too. I mean, who's in that band again? It's like a lot of names in that band.
Well, Steve Rome is
from the New Standards.
Greg Schutte, so they're all great. And then the Small Screens group is, in addition to myself on piano, there's Zach Harris on guitar, Michelle Kinney on cello, and Charlie Lincoln is the bassist. He's in New York now, but he's been shuttling back and forth. He grew up here, and so far we're managing to make that work, and I'm excited about that. Peter Hennig is the drummer, and then Christopher Thompson is he's the saxophonist and the clarinet player. He also plays some synthesizer too. So
nice. Well, you can learn more at dakotacooks.com. That's the website of the venue. Or you can go to dylanhicks.com as well. And while you're there, you might want to check out all of Dylan's music. And on your website, you have links to various places to purchase your different recordings. And as we say every week here, if you're listening online through YouTube, you're not getting the full effect. I mean, you're getting a real compressed version of what is a really amazing sounding record. And so you definitely want to get the high fidelity version, and you can do that by going to dylanhicks.com, or you could go directly to his Bandcamp page. Where, one way that you can tip artists is using this Bandcamp service where they let you pay more than what the CD is worth. And we highly suggest you do that. You can head on over to dylan-hicks.bandcamp.com, where you can check out all of his music, and you can pay what you want. Throw a little extra in his tip jar and show him how much you appreciate his music.
And we know that some of the regulars are building up quite the music library, the CD and record collections of all of our past guests. And I will say, a little birdie told me that Dylan might want to free up some space in his house. So buy one of those CDs, and you can add to your collection. But I do want to dig into some more music because. I think the more we talk about it, the more I'm just like, I want to hear more.
Right. And and every tune has a little something else. So we want to see the whole picture.
Exactly. And so we want to give folks as much of a taste as we can. And this next one is 2059. Is there anything you want to say quick before we dive in?
Yeah, sure. This one, it's funny. I can't remember. Making this record, it was on one hand, it was a very intoxicating period because I felt like I was so single-mindedly focused on making the record and losing track of time, and so that, in a way, that was a really happy thing. On the other hand, I wrote this song kind of in the moment. That's during that period. It was composed during the making of the record, and it felt pretty immediate. So it's sort of a song about depression and really partly about suicidal ideation, and also about for support from, in my case, from my wife or from other friends or from loved ones or from professionals or whatever, and kind of being able to get past those feelings and get back to something a little more livable. So it was a kind of strange period, I guess, in which I was really excited to be making all this music, but I think I struggled with that, emotional ups and downs, and I think there was kind of a low period during that time as well. So that was the emotional. I don't typically write autobiographical music, but this was a little more drawn from life. And then another thing that I really loved about it was that I had written this little kind of 8-bar little instrumental thing on a synthesizer. I have an analog synthesizer that sounds pretty cool and stuff like that. And then Michelle Kenny, the cellist, layered onto that, and then Zach Harris, the guitarist, did more layering. And I know that he told me he stayed up quite late, just kind of adding more and more guitar tracks to that. Now, when we play this live, we let that thing go for a minute and a half or two, and we just keep looping it. But it was really fun to get those back. And why did Zach send me 8 guitar tracks? And then when I put them all together, they all kind of add up. So they really, I don't mean kind of, they really do. So I'm really grateful to play with such creative musicians and to hear all their contributions to these.
Excellent. Well, let's give it a listen now. This is 2059, Dylan Hicks, here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
Can you really see it? In what way? Some supernatural empathy. Or because my eyes are wet, well, it's cold outside. Well, that's natural. Of course, I'm not a scientist. I've been waiting on the great reveal. Menu planning my final meals. I've got no right to feel this sad, but that don't kill me. I've been dreaming about the old Fort Bridge, but that's a high one and I can't swim. At least I got this love to deter me. Well, can you really feel it? Just how so? My skepticism holding sway. But do I really mean it? Well, usually no. You let me talk and you don't scare away. I've been waiting on the great reveal. Menu planning my final meals. I've got no right to feel this sad, but that won't kill me. I've been dreaming about the old Fort Bridge, but that's a high one and I can't swim. At least I got this blood to deter me. To lift, sky glowing orange like an old Ford lighter. Newspaper trucks after the graveyard shift. I've been waiting on the great reveal. Menu planning my final meals, but I canceled that soon with the insurance broker. I'm gonna love you till I die, sometime in 2059. It's not implausible, I was never a smoker. And when it comes to that great reveal, it'll be a letdown like this meal. You never know the great without the mediocre. might die sometime in 2059. It's not implausible, I was never a smoker. It's not implausible.
Oh yeah, I was so into that groove. I was like, "Oh wait, the song's ending."
Yes.
Dylan
That's JT
Hicks.
Bates on drums too
Oh,
again.
so good. He's so good, and he
So
plays.
good.
I mean, he comes from that jazz background, which you can hear, but he just can play any kind of music. He's even,
Yeah.
played on folk stuff, and then rock and pop stuff, and someone named Taylor Swift or something.
Yeah, I've heard
And
she's good. Yeah,
yeah, I
that's
don't
her
know.
own.
And Zach on the
Um,
guitar, man.
Oh,
Holy moly. He's
and
also just
and then
a
at the
top-notch
And then the
jazz
end,
player.
the cello. And I was curious at the very end of that tune, there was some sounds that I'm guessing were synths of some kind, but then there was there was a high warbly sound that almost sounded like a vocal, but I don't know if that was an instrument. It almost sounded like a saw, a musical saw.
Oh
High.
yeah. Well, I during that, I'm not sure if we're talking about the same part, but during that instrumental part, my synthesizer has a vocal element as well as I think Zach's guitar. I can't distinguish that anymore. I can't. He might be able to better.
But yeah, it almost had this operatic kind of
I
feel.
heard that.
to
Yeah,
one
I
of the
know,
parts.
but we
Yeah,
didn't. It's
beautiful.
funny because there are other parts in the record where I use a sound that is derived from a vocal sample.
Mhm.
So it actually is a human voice that's been filtered. But none of those sounds were that. It just have that quality. I don't know.
So beautiful.
It's funny about the ending too because that's one of the ones where JT plays with. I had programmed something and I asked him to kind of play on top of that. And that's one thing that happens is that with a lot of these tunes, they just end because I don't really like a fade too often. I think the last song we'll hear has a fade, but usually I don't think that's the solution. And then I don't really know how to like program a thing that sounds like an ending.
Mm-hmm.
So it usually just ends. It usually just ends. We usually have more ideas about how to end things if we're all playing them together,
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, it's great. And folks really digging it. Megan says, so good. Alan says, another great groove. He says, I don't suppose you can autograph my download copy. That's a little hard, but
Yeah.
but I'm glad that you're getting the high res files, Alan. And Becky, our good
Hey, Becky.
friend, past guest, says such a groove, beautiful song. And
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
I also really love the lyrics in that song are so great. And we haven't really talked too much about a lot of the lyrical components, but I've always been such a fan of your writing. And you have a writing background. You've written books and and you've done music journalism, all different kinds of writing. And but that song, I think it's such a, even though you were saying it came from a place of depression, it's such a beautiful love song,
Oh yeah.
and I just and I just I'll love you till I die, probably 2059. It's plausible. Smoker, I love it. It's how do you see the differences between like writing a something that ends up being a longer form like a book or a short story versus a song? Do you really see them as two separate mediums, or do things some travel back and forth between the two?
Well, I mean, I haven't been working on a book length manuscript for a while. So in some ways, I've been kind of thinking about my literary pursuits really as being lyric writing.
Hmm.
And then I've been doing some stuff with this group, Small Screens, where I'll do something. I'll write something prosy and then maybe kind of memorize it and then improvise it based on what I can memorize, and I might have the text somewhere at hand so I could refer to if I had to. Those will be longer pieces, more prose pieces, and then we'll improvise. Usually the rest of the group will improvise while I recite those things. That's a little closer to some of the other writing I've done. Um, I don't know. I guess there's the economy of it. With lyrics, I have to, I don't have as many words to deal with, and usually have some musical interests that I want to focus on. So there's probably a little more, probably favor some elliptical sort of narration or kind of. I like to be. I do value clarity, but I also I don't mind a fair amount of ambiguity. If I feel like there's some kind of emotional resonance or maybe a few images that will people can latch on to.
Hmm.
Might be a little more interested in clarity on if I were writing a novel.
Hmm.
So there's that. I guess lately, particularly on this more recent record, but on a few tunes from this one. Usually, what happens when I make a record is that I feel like I've kind of explored something sufficiently, and then a few other things say, oh, that might have been the beginning of something, the next thing,
Hmm.
And so there were a few tunes on this record that didn't rhyme or use a very regular meter. I don't think we've heard any of those, but um, so I kind of want to do a bit more of that on the record that followed.
Hmm.
So that's a little bit closer to maybe some of the like some of those lyrics kind of look a little bit more like sentences,
Hmm.
and then I tried to figure out how to sing them and then edit them so they could be sung. Um, and that's been kind of fun. I do like working with rhyme and regular meter and kind of more formally traditional song lyric ideas, but it is kind of fun to see what you can get away with and without those, and sometimes you can kind of, it still sings and it still feels musical. So,
Hmm.
um,
I love that there's a theme from either exploring making electronic sounds in your home studio or experimenting with more prose sounding lyrics and how to turn that into something musical. I love that there's a theme of play. Like you're like, well, it'll be fun to try this out and see how the puzzle pieces fit. And I feel like I hear that a lot in your music. That no matter what style of music you're doing, and like your new record with small screens. Airport sparrows,
sparrows,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
I know there's birds in both.
Yeah, it may be a trilogy. I'm not sure yet.
But that has kind of some totally different sounds, and I feel like one thing though that seems to run throughout all of them is this sort of playfulness. Even when it's maybe addressing serious subjects, it
Oh
has
yeah.
the music has a playfulness to it that I think uh, is is increasingly rare. I don't always hear artists who are willing to play.
Oh,
So I really like that about your
oh,
music.
that's great to hear. Yeah, I mean, and that record had that other element of play where we were in the same room together, and I recorded most of the vocals live, which was kind of new for me. I did do a few as an overdub, but so we kind of recorded it a little more in the in sort of the folk or jazz tradition where we were kind of all in a room together playing things as they happened. And but yeah, I think what you say is true. I mean, I guess I feel really fortunate that I do have some people who pay attention to my music and have followed it over the years or are just now discovering it. And so there's a small audience out there, but it is small. But one of the advantages really of obscurity, and it's not exclusively advantageous. But one of the advantages is that I think maybe it lets the artist feel a little bit more at liberty to kind of just try a lot of different things. There aren't a whole lot of expectations as to what you ought to
Mhm.
do.
Yeah.
But that really, for me, I'm always restless to kind of try new things, and
Mhm.
so
And
um,
speaking of that, it looks like Joni had a question. Do you have a favorite style, or do they all fit different moods? I'm assuming she means to
um,
perform.
yeah. I don't really. I mean, I'm not sure if she means as a listener or as a performer. I it's funny. I When I was a teenager, I was really into reading about music, criticism, or history, and I loved. By the time I was in my late teens, and I had some people around me who turned me on to some cool stuff too. Listen to jazz and rock, folk, R&B, some world music, some great music from Africa that was coming out in the '80s, reggae and hip hop and country, and so I think I thought at the time that given that I was already pretty eclectic, that I would really I would become really eclectic by the time I was my age, 52. And actually, I just listen to more of that same stuff. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. I just kind of, there's just more and more of it. So
Yeah.
that's probably the foundation is kind of, I guess you would say, American music, a lot of Black American music, a lot of, some of the songwriters from the songbook tradition that, grew out of Tin Pan Alley and Broadway, and just now I listen to a lot of contemporary jazz. I think I like to listen to music by some younger people, but I don't always feel socially aligned with popular music, even though I admire what people are doing. The jazz probably speaks to me a bit more. So
Hmm.
I'm not really technically equipped to play jazz myself, but I like to try to get a little deeper into that and also work with other people who are more proficient in that way. So.
Wonderful. Well, Lynn had a quick question, and then we're going to try and squeeze in this last tune. I don't know if we have time, but we're going to try. We're going to make it happen for folks. Can you speak about the album cover, uh, mid-century vibe? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, that was done by a friend of mine named Richard Barlow. I've known him, Rich, since the '90s. He doesn't live in Minneapolis anymore. He's a teacher and an artist, and does a lot of different kinds of work. But that I know he did with colored paper that he cut out and then laid out. Um, and I don't. It looks like a digital image that you would create on the computer, but it really was something that he photographed
Hmm.
and assembled, on a table or on a. I don't remember exactly. He could probably speak to that process more, but
Really? Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed. It's really cool.
Yeah, very cool.
yeah.
And as we mentioned, this album, Accidental Birds, came out in 2021. Then you released the months or you just released Airport Sparrows, continuing the bird theme with that live band you were talking about, Small Screens, which has many
Yeah.
of the same players, but kind of recorded in a more conventional way, maybe in
Yeah.
the studio. And that's who you're going to be playing with on January 24th at the Dakota. And you can find both of those records on your website and on Bandcamp. And right now, we have one more song that we're going to squeeze in. But before we do that, maybe we're going to end with a song. So I do want to just take this moment to thank you, Dylan, for joining us today
Yeah, thank you. Went
and
by fast.
talking about these songs, and then also to all of the folks out there listening and asking all these great questions. And if you liked the show today, like it on YouTube, direct more bots to this guy, Dylan Hicks, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and find out about who we have coming up next week. And if this show is new to you, we do this every Friday at 4 p.m. Not every week with Dylan Hicks, not always as eclectic as Dylan, but we always have a great artist on to talk about old records. And there's a lot of folks that make it happen, including our Patreon supporters. We want to thank these folks: Penny, Ann, Alinda, Bevan, Connie, Vaughn, Alan, Chris, Alex, Becky, Galen, Peggy, Joe, Jim, Beverly, and John, Fred, Tim, Sarah, David, Jocelyn, Court, Matt, Steve, Mark, Homestead, Pick and Parlor, Severin, Lynn, Jake, Mary, Many Tracks, Nikki, Joni, and David. And if you want to support the show, you can join us on that Patreon link, and you get invited to special after parties on Zoom and online events. And you get to find out first who's going to be on the show. So that's a way of supporting the show. But mainly, we want to thank you all for joining us on this Friday. It's our favorite hour of the week. And
Really is.
this week, such great and interesting music, and perfect way to start my weekend. So we're going to go out with one more song here. Winola from Accidental Birds. Is there anything quick you want to say about it before we take off?
I know we're under the gun for time. No, but this is one of a handful of tunes that we did record in a studio. JT's plays on it again, along with Kevin Gastonque, who's a brilliant keyboardist and organist. Charlie Lincoln plays upright bass on this. I play piano, and Zach plays guitar. And then Jake Baldwin sits in with us on trumpet. I had this sort of trumpet melody that came to me as I was walking back from the supermarket and sort of notated it for Jake, but then he took it into a different direction and layered it. And he's a brilliant player, so took it farther than I could have.
Wonderful. Well, let's give it a listen.
All right, this is Wynola, Dylan Hicks here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
Well, we moved out to the country, 'cause we got the land for cheap. From all my friends in Terre Haute, I ain't heard a peep. Coyotes howl at midnight, the church bells ring at noon. Cash or inspiration, gonna need one of them soon. So how about you pick up the banjo, and I'll attempt to sing. I still know a guy in Nashville. He might find us in the slush pile, like a mitten in the spring. Write a name song for me, Wynola, and I must have payola. We'll peak at number 43. Write a name song for me and call her Wynola. Your kids are like Zola. Anyone who won't sing with me, yeah, if it's broke, then I can fix it, but I can't make a buck. I guess no one likes the bumper stickers peeling off my truck. And yes, this shop is growing, but like a tree more than a weed. And in 7 months, if all goes well, we're gonna have more mouths to feed. So how about you take up the mando, and I'll pretend to sing. I sorta know a guy in Nashville. He might fish us from the slush pile, like a mitten in the spring. Write a name song for me, Wynola, and I must have payola. We'll peak at number 43. Yeah, write a name song for me and call her Wynola. 'Cause your kids are like soda. Anyone who won't sing with me, yeah, write a name song for me, Wynola. Put it on the Victrola, but dance till our shoes are warm. Write a name song for me, Wynola, 'cause I just wanna hold it while your voice comes out the horn and it goes.
All right. Dylan Hicks with Wynola, wrapping things up today on the Back Catalog Listening Party. What a perfect way to
Awesome.
end the show. And also starting with a dance song and ending with a dance song. Two very different styles, but
Yeah.
And we managed to get a banjo referenced on the
Yeah, I
show,
forgot
which is
about that.
always a
Yeah.
bonus
Yeah.
here for us.
yeah, exactly. And folks loving it. Alan, Ann picking up the album.
Yeah, way to
and,
go, Ann.
And Wiley thanking us for another great show. Yes, thank you for joining us today. Big thanks to you, Dylan, for stopping by and sharing.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, it was really a lot of fun. Yeah.
And we'll see you January 24th if you live in the Twin Cities. He and his band, The Small Screens. So if you like the sound of that last song, it's going to be kind of a little more in that vein at the show. And they'll be playing with the Neighborhood Quartet. DakotaCooks.com for tickets. Of course, you can pick up the music at DylanHicks.com. Thank you so much, and I'm excited to start my weekend.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
again,
you.
Dylan, and we'll see all you next week here on the Back Catalog Listening Party. Cheers.
Cheers.